A man stands at a wedding altar, hands shaking, staring at a woman he's never met. The whole town is watching, thinking he'll be totally embarrassed. But boy, are they in for a surprise? They're about to see something way different. 3 days? Earlier, Malachi Brook was the cockiest rancher around. His cows wandered over thousands of acres, and folks listened to him in every saloon from here to the county line. He had more land than anyone should, and he bragged about it all the time. But like his dad always said, being too proud leads to a big fall. That fall showed up as Samuel Gentry, a traveling seller with cold eyes and a book full of debts. Gentry rolled in on a Tuesday morning, his wagon packed with stuff and his pockets stuffed with IOUs. Malachi owed him more cash than he could scrape together in 6 months, maybe longer. The dry weather had wiped out his cows. The bank said no to a loan, and his neighbors had their own messes. "I can't pay you in cash," Malachi told him, sitting in his dusty living room while Gentry eyed the plain furniture like he was adding up prices. "I know," Gentry said, not looking up from his book, "but I have another deal in mind." The deal was simple but crushing. Gentry had been talking to the tribal leaders for months, trying to set up safe trade paths through their land. The leaders wanted more than money or items. They wanted a real link between their world and the white folks' town, sign of true respect and trust. "Chief Tehatin has a daughter," Gentry explained, his voice dry like dead grass. "Beautiful girl, taught by missionaries, speaks perfect English. She needs a husband who can help her people deal with our world." Malachi felt his stomach drop. "You're talking about an arranged marriage? I'm talking about survival. Yours and theirs." The choice was harsh and clear. Marry the native woman and keep the alliance, or face money ruin and probably rough stuff from Gentry's buddies. Malachi had seen what happened to guys who couldn't pay up in these parts. Some vanished for good, others turned up in quick graves. That night, Malachi sat on his porch staring at the stars, trying to picture his new life. He'd never laid eyes on this woman, didn't know her name, had no clue what she looked like, or how she'd feel about being traded like a cow. The idea creeped him out, but the other options scared him even more. The wedding was set for Saturday morning. No party, no big meal, just a plain ceremony to tie two strangers together and hopefully stop a fight nobody wanted. Now at that altar, Malachi watched the tribal group come through the morning fog. The woman walking to him moved with such smooth grace that it hushed all the quiet talks around them. Her dress was simple but pretty, woven with designs he didn't know. Her long black hair was braided with tiny beads that sparkled in the sun, but it was her eyes that took his breath away. They weren't the sad, scared eyes he'd figured on. They shone with smarts and power that made him step back without thinking. She stopped 3 feet away and spoke in a voice that rang out over the quiet crowd. "I am Ayana, daughter of Chief Tehatin. I know exactly why I'm here, and I know exactly what you think of me." The crowd got restless. This wasn't how anybody thought the wedding would start. Malachi opened his mouth to say something, but she kept going. "What you don't know," she continued, her eyes stuck on his face, "is what I'm going to do about it." Malachi's throat went dry. The way she said those words with such quiet sureness knocked down every idea he'd had about this setup. He'd expected crying, giving in, maybe even thanks for pulling her from a wild life. Instead, he was facing a woman who looked right through him and saw he wasn't good enough. The preacher cleared his throat, nervous. "Shall we proceed with the ceremony?" Gina turned to the old man with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Of course. Maud, first I have something to say." She faced the crowd, her voice reaching everyone in the quiet group. "My father sent me here to build a bridge between our peoples. He believes this union can bring peace and prosperity to both communities." Murmurs went through the crowd. Some nodded like they agreed, others fidgeted like they were uneasy. Malachi noticed a few. Guys touching their guns like her being there was a danger. "I accepted this arrangement," Ayana kept on, "not because I had no choice, but because I believe in my father's vision. However, I will not pretend this marriage means anything more than a political alliance." The words smacked Malachi like a hit. He'd been dreading this wedding, seeing it as a load to carry. but hearing her brush it off so easy hurt his pride in ways he didn't see coming. Furthermore, she said, turning back to him, I will not be treated like property or expected to become something I'm not. If you think marriage gives you ownership over me, you'll discover how wrong you are very quickly. Samuel Gentry stepped up, his face red with mad. Now, see here, this isn't what we agreed upon. The arrangement was for a proper Christian wife who would... The arrangement, Ayanna cut in, her voice sharp like it could slice leather, was for a marriage that would secure trade agreements and prevent bloodshed. Nothing more, nothing less. Malachi found himself talking before he thought it out. And what exactly do you expect from me in this arrangement? She looked at his face for a long time, like deciding if he was worth answering for real. Respect would be a start. Beyond that, we'll have to see if you're capable of learning. The preacher, wanting to wrap up the face-off fast, hurried through the ceremony too quick. The vows were said in voices just above whispers, neither looking at the other. When the preacher said they were husband and wife, the usual kiss got swapped for a quick, cold handshake that felt more like a deal than a wedding thing. The crowd left fast, clearly not comfy with what they saw, lots of white folks muttered. To each other, faces dark with not liking it. Some tribal folks who came looked worried too, but for different reasons. As the last watchers left, Malachi was alone with his new wife for the first time. The quiet between them stretched like a big gap. Neither wanted to cross it. Finally, Ayanna spoke. I'll need somewhere to stay tonight. My house, Malachi said. Without thinking, then wished he hadn't sounded so owning. She raised an eyebrow. Your house. And where exactly do you expect me to sleep? Before he could answer, noise broke out from the town's edge. Yells and horse hooves. Thundering meant. Riders coming quick. Malachi's blood froze when he knew the lead horse. The Garrett brothers were here to get their debts, and they weren't patient types. The 3 Garrett brothers pulled up their horses 20 feet away, dust swirling like smoke from a field fire. Jake Garrett, the oldest, got off slow, like he knew. He had the upper hand. His younger brothers Tom and Billy stayed on their horses, hands easy on their gun grips. Well, Jake said, spitting chew juice into the dirt. Heard you got yourself married, Malachi? Congratulations. Eyes went to Ayanna with a look that made Malachi's jaw tighten. Little thing. Shame about the circumstances. What do you want, Jake? Malachi stepped a bit in front of Ayanna. A move nobody missed. You know exactly what I want. It's $200 plus interest. Been patient long enough. Jake's smile showed brown teeth from chewing. Of course, now that you've got yourself a wife, maybe we can work out a different arrangement. The hint hung there like a bad smell. Malachi felt anger rising, but before he could talk, Ayanna stepped around him. I think there's been a misunderstanding, she said, her voice calm and chatty. This debt was incurred before our marriage, which means it belongs to my husband alone. Jake laughed hard, like breaking glass. That's not how things work around here, sweetheart. When a man can't pay his debts, we take what we can get. And when you threaten the wife of Chief Tehaten's daughter, Ayanna replied, still nice stoned you declare war on my father's entire tribe. Are you prepared for those consequences? The laugh stuck in Jake's throat. Everybody knew Chief Tehaten led over 200 warriors, and he never held back when his family was in danger. You're bluffing, Tom yelled from his horse, but he didn't sound sure, am I? Ayanna pulled a beaded bracelet from her belt pouch that sparkled in the sun. This belonged to my grandmother, who died fighting soldiers who thought they could take what didn't belong to them. My father gave it to me as a wedding gift along with instructions to send it back to him if anyone threatened my safety. Held the bracelet up so all 3 brothers could see. Told me that when he receives this, he'll know exactly what it means and he'll respond accordingly. Billy Garrett's horse stepped sideways, feeling his rider's worry. Jake, maybe we should... ... double quotes, shut up, Jake snapped. But Malachi saw doubt in his eyes. A debt's a debt, and we ain't leaving empty-handed. Then perhaps we can discuss a payment plan, Malachi said, surprised at his own calm. Give me 6 months to get back on my feet, and I'll pay you what I owe plus 20% interest. Jake's eyes snapped to him. 6 months is too long. Things can happen in 6 months. Men disappear. Debts get forgotten. 1 month, then, Ayanna said, before Malachi could. Surely you can wait 1 month for guaranteed payment plus interest. And what guarantee do I have? Jake demanded. Ayana smiled, and for the first time since the ceremony it looked real. You have my word, and I promise you my word is worth more than you can imagine. The brothers looked at each other, clearly not liking how this turned against them. After a bit, Jake got back on his horse. 1 month, he said. But if you don't have our money by then, we're taking it out of both of you. He turned his horse, and the 3 brothers rode off fast, leaving dust behind. Malachi stared after them till they were gone, then turned to see Ayana watching him with a face he couldn't read. That was either very brave or very stupid, he said. Probably both. She put the bracelet away. But now we have a bigger problem. What's that? She looked to the horizon where storm clouds were building. I just promised them something I'm not sure you can deliver, and if we fail, those men won't be our biggest concern. Malachi stared at the storm clouds gathering on the horizon, trying to wrap his head around what Ayana had just said. A bigger concern than the Garrett brothers seemed impossible. Those 3 men had killed over debts before, and everyone in the territory knew it. What could be worse than having killers hunting us? He asked. Ayana was quiet for a long moment, her eyes scanning the empty prairie around them. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. My father didn't just arrange this marriage for trade agreements. There's something he didn't tell Samuel Gentry, something he couldn't risk becoming common knowledge, she started, walking toward Malachi's house, forcing him to follow. Her pace was measured, but he could sense the tension in her shoulders. 3 weeks ago, a group of men came to our village. They weren't settlers or traders. They wore good clothes, carried expensive weapons, and spoke like educated men from back east. They claimed to represent a railroad company, Malachi felt. His stomach tightened. Railroad men meant trouble for everyone. They bought land cheap, drove out anyone who refused to sell, and left entire communities destroyed in their wake. They offered to buy our territory for a fraction of what it's worth. Ayana continued. When my father refused, they made it clear the offer wasn't really an offer. They reached the porch of Malachi's modest house. Paint was peeling, and one of the steps creaked ominously under their weight. Ayana paused at the door, her hand resting on the worn wood. That's why he pushed so hard for this marriage. He needs allies among the white settlers, people who understand how these railroad men operate and can help us fight them legally. And you think I'm that ally? Malachi couldn't keep the bitter laugh out of his voice. I can't even manage my own debts. What makes you think I can stand up to railroad money? Ayana turned to face him, and for the first time since the ceremony, her mask of controlled composure slipped. He saw fear in her eyes, real and raw. Because you have something. They don't expect. You have nothing left to lose. Before he could respond, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior of his house was sparse and showed signs of a man who'd been selling off possessions to pay bills. The furniture was mostly gone, leaving just a table, 2 chairs, and a bed in the back room. Ayana surveyed the empty space without judgment. How long do you think it will take these railroad men to realize our marriage creates a legal claim to tribal lands? The implications hit him like a physical blow. They'll come after both of us. They'll come after everyone, she said. Neighbors, my people, anyone who stands in their way. She moved to the single window and peered out at the approaching storm. That's why we only have 1 month. It's not just about paying the Garrett brothers. It's about preparing for a war that's coming whether we're ready or not. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed by the low rumble of thunder. The storm was moving faster than either of them had expected. There's something else, Ayana said, not turning from the window. Those railroad men, they were asking specific questions about you. They know about your debts, your property lines, your family history. They've been planning this for months. Malachi joined her at the window, and together they watched as the storm clouds swallowed the last of the sunlight. In the growing darkness, he thought he saw movement on the distant hills. They're already here, aren't they? He said. Ayana's reflection in the glass looked back at him with grim certainty. They never left. The knock on the door came at exactly midnight. 3 sharp raps that cut through the sound of rain hammering against the roof. Malachi had been lying awake on the floor beside his bed, giving Ayana the only decent place to sleep. Neither of them had spoken much after her revelation about the railroad men, but both had known this moment would come. Ayanna was already sitting, up fully dressed. She'd never even pretended to sleep. "How many?" Malachi whispered, reaching for the rifle he'd propped against the wall. "For horses," she replied, moving to the window with the fluid silence of someone who'd grown up hunting. 2 men at the door, 2 circling to the back. Another knock, more insistent this time. A cultured voice called through the wood. "Mr. Brooke, we know you're awake. We'd like to have a civilized conversation." Malachi looked at Ayanna, who shook her head slightly. Whatever these men wanted, it wouldn't be civilized. "We're here on behalf of the Continental Railroad Development Company," the voice continued. "We have a very generous offer for your property. It's not for sale," Malachi called back.
Oh.
A different voice, rougher around the edges, spoke up. "Everything's for sale, friend. Just depends on the price." Ayanna had moved to the back door, her ear pressed against the wood. She held up 2 fingers, confirming that the other men were in position. They were trapped. "Mr. Brooke," the cultured voice said, "perhaps we should mention that we're also here to discuss your recent marriage. Quite an interesting development, legally speaking." That confirmed what Ayanna had suspected. These men understood exactly what the marriage meant in terms of land rights and tribal treaties. "Your wife's tribal connections create certain complications. For our development plans," the voice continued. "However, we believe we can reach a mutually beneficial arrangement." The sound of breaking glass came from the back of the house. Ayanna spun away from the door, grabbing a heavy iron skillet from the kitchen counter. She pressed herself against the wall beside the shattered window, ready to strike anyone who climbed through. "The thing is," the rough voice said, "much closer. Now we've been watching you both for days. We know about your debts, your situation with the Garrett brothers, your complete lack of options." A boot crunched on broken glass inside the house. The man who'd entered through the back window was trying to move quietly, but the storm wasn't loud enough to cover the sound completely. "We're prepared to pay off all your debts and give you enough money to start fresh somewhere else," cultured voice said. "All you have to do is sign over your property rights and dissolve this inconvenient marriage." The intruder was close now, maybe 10 feet from where Ayanna waited. Malachi could see the shadow of his hat in the dim light, filtering through the front window. "And if we refuse?" Malachi asked, trying to keep the man talking while Ayanna positioned herself. "Well," the voice said with mock sadness, "accidents happen all the time out here. Men get in over their heads with debts, make enemies, sometimes disappear entirely. Their widows naturally are much more reasonable about property sales."
That
was when Ayanna struck. The skillet connected with the intruder's skull with a sound like a melon hitting the ground. The man dropped without a sound, his gun clattering across the wooden floor. The conversation at the front door stopped abruptly. "Charlie," the rough voice called. "Charlie, you find anything back there?" Malachi made his decision. He threw open the front door with his rifle raised, catching both men by surprise. They'd been expecting negotiation, not resistance. "Get off my property," he said. The man with the cultured voice smiled, seemingly unimpressed by the weapon pointed at his chest. "Mr. Brooke, you're making a serious mistake. You represent very powerful interests. People who don't accept no for an answer. And they're going to learn something new today," Ayanna said, peering beside Malachi with the unconscious man's gun in her hand. The cultured man's smile faded when he saw the cold determination in her eyes. "Mrs. Brooke, you seem like an intelligent woman. Surely you understand that your husband's pride isn't worth dying for." "You're right," she said. "It's not, but my people's land is—" That's when they heard the sound that made all 4 of them freeze. Hoofbeats, lots of them coming fast through the rain. The thunder of at least 20 horses approaching from multiple directions. The cultured man's face went pale. "What did you do?" Ayanna's smile was sharp as a knife blade. "I sent a message to my father yesterday. Told him we might need help. Tonight, the tribal warriors emerged from the storm like ghosts made flesh, their horses moving with supernatural quiet despite the thunder of hooves moments before. Chief Tehatan rode at the front, his weathered face carved from stone, his eyes reflecting the lightning that split the sky above them. Behind him, 28 of his finest warriors sat motionless on their mounts, weapons ready but not yet drawn. The cultured man took an involuntary step backward, his confident demeanor evaporating like morning mist. His rough companion reached for his gun, then thought better of it when he saw how outnumbered they were. Father Ayana called out in her native tongue, her voice carrying clearly through the rain. Chief Tahitan dismounted and walked toward the house, his boots splashing through puddles that reflected the lightning above. When he reached his daughter, he placed a protective hand on her shoulder and studied Malachi with keen eyes.
That's great.
"Is your husband?" he asked in English, his accent thick, but his words clear. "Yes," Ayana replied. "And these men came to threaten us both." The chief's attention shifted to the railroad men, and Malachi saw something in the older man's expression that made his blood run cold. This wasn't just protective anger. This was the calm calculation of someone who'd spent decades defending his people from exactly this kind of threat. "You are the railroad men my daughter told me about," Chief Tahitan said. It wasn't a question. The cultured man tried to recover his composure. "Chief Tahitan, I presume? We're simply here to discuss a business arrangement with Mr. Brooke. Nothing that concerns your people directly. Everything that concerns my daughter concerns me directly." The chief stepped closer, and despite being shorter than the railroad man, he somehow seemed to tower over him. "You came to her home in the night with weapons and threats. In my culture, that is an act of war." The rough companion started edging toward his horse, but two of the warriors had already moved to block his path. There would be no easy escape. "Now wait just a minute," the cultured man said, his voice climbing toward panic. "We're here under the protection of federal law. The Continental Railroad Development Company has legal authority to negotiate land acquisitions in this territory." "Show me this legal authority," Chief Tahitan demanded. The man fumbled in his coat and produced a folded document. The chief took it, glanced at it briefly, then handed it to Ayana. She read it quickly, her frown deepening with each line. "This document gives them authority to negotiate with individual landowners," she said. "But it doesn't give them the right to make threats or enter homes by force. More importantly," Chief Tahitan added, "it doesn't give them any authority over tribal lands. And as of yesterday, when my daughter married your husband, this property became part of tribal territory under the Treaty of 1852. Malachi blinked in surprise. He'd never heard of any such treaty. But from the way the railroad man's face went white, it was clearly real and significant. "That treaty was dissolved years ago," the cultured man protested weakly. "Was it?" Chief Tahitan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Perhaps you should check your legal documents more carefully before making such claims." The sound of more horses approaching made everyone turn. Through the rain, Malachi could see torches moving toward them from the direction of town. Someone else was coming, and from the speed of their approach, they weren't bringing good news. "The Garrett brothers," Ayana whispered. "They must have seen the warriors and thought we were under attack." Chief Tahitan's expression hardened further. "How many enemies do you have, Mr. Brooke?" Before Malachi could answer, gunshots erupted. From the darkness beyond the torchlight, the gunshots came from 3 different directions at once. Muzzle flashes lighting up the storm-darkened prairie like deadly fireworks. Chief Tahitan barked orders in his native language, and his warriors immediately spread out in a defensive formation that spoke of years of combat experience. "Get down," Malachi shouted, grabbing Ayana and pulling her behind the corner of the house just as a bullet splintered the wood where she'd been standing. The cultured railroad man wasn't fast enough. A shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him into the mud. His rough companion dove behind their horses, using the animals as cover while he returned fire into the darkness. "Jake Garrett," Chief Tahitan called out over the chaos. "Show yourself," a voice answered from somewhere near the barn. "Chief, we ain't here for you. Just want what's owed to us." "The railroad men hired them," Ayana said, pressing herself against the wall. "They're all working together." But even as she spoke, more gunfire erupted from a completely different direction. These shots were more organized, more disciplined. A new voice cut through the storm. "This is Federal Marshal Davis. Lay down your weapons immediately." Malachi felt his heart sink. Federal marshals meant the railroad company had more legal authority than they'd admitted. They could arrest everyone here on charges of interfering with interstate commerce, There Ayanna pointed toward the ridge behind the house. More riders coming. At least 6 men on horseback were silhouetted against the lightning, their badges glinting in the brief flashes of light. They were moving in tactical formation, clearly trained lawmen rather than hired thugs. Chief Tehatan raised his rifle and fired a single shot into the air. "Hold your fire," he commanded, and his warriors immediately stopped shooting. The discipline was remarkable. Marshal Davis, the chief, called out, "I am Chief Tehatan of the Wind River people. Railroad. Men attacked my daughter and her husband in their home. We are here lawfully protecting our family." A pause in the gunfire. Then Marshal Davis rode closer, close enough for them to see his face in the torchlight. He was older than Malachi had expected, with gray in his beard and eyes that had seen too much violence. "Chief, I have warrants for the arrest of your daughter and her husband on charges of conspiracy to defraud the Continental Railroad Development Company." "On what evidence?" Ayanna stepped out from behind cover despite Malachi's attempt to hold her back. "Evidence that you entered into a fraudulent marriage to circumvent legal land acquisition proceedings," the marshal replied. "The railroad company filed a complaint yesterday in federal court." The pieces suddenly clicked into place for Malachi. "You planned this from the beginning," he said to the wounded railroad man. "You let us think we had a month, but you were already getting the warrants." The cultured man struggled to his feet, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "The law is the law. Mr. Brooke, your marriage was a transparent attempt to use tribal treaty rights to block legitimate development. Except the marriage is real," Ayanna said firmly. "And the treaty rights are legitimate, whether you like them or not." Jake Garrett's voice called out from the darkness. "What about our money, Marshal? We got legal debts to collect, too." "Marshal." Davis looked genuinely frustrated. "Mr. Garrett, you and your brothers need to stand down. This is now a federal matter." "It's like hell it is." Another voice from the shadows. "It's probably Tom Garrett. We got rights, too." That's when everything went wrong at once. Billy Garrett, apparently deciding that federal marshals weren't going to protect his interests, opened fire on the lawmen. The marshals returned fire immediately. Chief Tehatan's warriors, thinking the shooting was directed at them, began firing at everyone who wasn't clearly identified as friendly. In the chaos, the wounded railroad man pulled a hidden pistol from his coat. Malachi saw him raising it toward Ayanna and threw himself between them just as the gun fired. The bullet caught him in the side, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the mud beside his wife. Through the haze of pain and shock, he heard Ayanna scream his name. But what he saw next, as his vision began to blur, was Chief Tehatan standing over the railroad man with his rifle pointed directly at the man's head. His finger on the trigger. "Father, stop." Ayanna's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Chief Tehatan's finger froze on the trigger, his eyes never leaving the wounded railroad man's face. The gunfire had stopped as suddenly as it began. Marshal Davis stood over Jake Garrett's motionless form, while his deputies had the other two. Garrett brothers on their knees with hands behind their heads. The storm was passing, and in the sudden quiet, everyone could hear Malachi's labored breathing. "He's bleeding badly," Ayanna said, pressing her hands against the wound in his side. Her voice was steady, but Malachi could see the fear in her eyes. "Why did you do that?" she whispered to him. "Because," he managed through gritted teeth. "You were right about everything." Marshal Davis approached cautiously, his weapon still drawn, but pointed at the ground. "Chief Tehatan, please lower your rifle. We need to sort this out legally, not with more bloodshed." "This man tried to murder my daughter," the chief replied, not moving. "And he'll answer for it in court," the marshal said. But not like this." Ayanna looked up from Malachi's wound. "Marshal, I need to see those warrants you mentioned." Davis frowned but pulled the documents from his coat. Ayanna read them quickly, her expression growing more confident with each line. "These warrants are based on a complaint that our marriage was fraudulent," she announced. "But they were filed before the marriage ceremony even took place. The railroad company accused us of conspiracy to commit fraud before we were even legally wed." The marshal's frown deepened as he realized the implications. "Furthermore," Ayanna continued, "the 1852 treaty is still valid. I can prove it." She reached into her pouch and withdrew a small leather bundle. Inside were several official-looking documents with federal seals. "My father gave me these yesterday," she said, handing them to the marshal.